Thank you.
Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Angus.
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cherian. We're very pleased to have you. We think we should have a special desk for you here because you're at our committee all the time, and we're using your advice consistently. That's wonderful. I'm concerned about the transformation of the struggle over the privacy file over the last 10 years. Even as we update PIPEDA and that, there's many other elements that this seems to be affecting. And I refer to you to a recent statement by the Bank of Canada that normally doesn't weigh in on these matters, but the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada, Carolyn Wilkins, said that they're very concerned about the effect on competition in the Canadian economy by the massive control of personal data by a few giant tech firms, most American firms. Quote, access to and control of user data can make some firms virtually unassailable. They can easily drive out competition by combining their scale with innovative use of data to anticipate and meet evolving customer needs at a lower price and sometimes free. Would you consider it necessary that we start to advocate for more powers for your office to start to deal with the more diversified issues that are coming up with the growing data giants, whether it's issues of anti-competition as well as issues of privacy protection?
The short answer is yes, although I don't think it would be appropriate for the Office of the Privacy Commissioner to review all of these issues, but I think I would agree with the Deputy Governor of the bank to start. I think from the privacy perspective, the issue at hand, or one of the main issues at hand here, with the growing centralization of powers in the hands of a few, and the lack of authority or sanctions for actions that violate privacy, is the issue of trust. If the digital economy is to grow, consumers, citizens need to have trust that when they engage in that economy, that their personal information will not be sold or misused, and that there has to be sanctions. Others, such as the Competition Bureau, would certainly have a role to play on the issue of whether monopolies are created. So I think new technologies raise very important concerns that I think have to be addressed through a number of laws and regulators with the capacity to share information and cooperate with one another.
Thank you. To that end, I'm concerned. I've heard from many people about the new agreement that Rogers is putting on its consumers, saying that if you use their services, that you're essentially agreeing to give them access to your personal contacts as terms and conditions of use. In your view, would that be a breach of PIPEDA?
We've been in touch with the company in question, and my understanding is that they have agreed to remove that particular aspect of their privacy policy. We're also investigating other issues with respect to that organization, but on that specific point, my understanding is that they have agreed to withdraw that part.
Well, thank you for that. I guess my concern is that we have Rogers as a Canadian company, a very well protected by Canadian law to maintain their market, and it's a Rogers portal that then goes to a U.S. server. So how do we determine that Canadian law of our information that ends up on an American server like Yahoo, that it still is under the rules and rights of Canadian law?
We were able to convince the sum of companies at stake here to change their practices, even though some of them are American. So I think the law was satisfactory from that perspective in that case.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's good to hear because we've had a lot of concern over it. In 2016, there was a data theft of 57 million users from Uber that was traced back to a Canadian. And Uber did not release that breach. They paid them off, which some U.S. congressman said was reprehensible behavior. I understand you've been looking into this matter. You're formally investigating it now?
Yeah.
It's come up again because of recent testimony of Brittany Kaiser at the UK hearings on Cambridge Analytica, that Cambridge Analytica had met with Facebook, with Uber, which Uber is denying. But there's questions of whether or not that data may have been sold. And this is all speculation, but would you be, just to clarify, would you be raising the issue of Uber and that breach with your UK counterpart when you speak?
We're starting with an investigation of the breach. If that leads us to the issue you're mentioning, we will go there and we will talk to our UK colleagues.
Okay, that's good to know. And again, what I want to know coming out of this is that, you know, these issues that are being raised in the public and at committees in various jurisdictions are being followed up. So I'm very pleased with that. This issue of this hacker in Canada that was paid off, to me that's a very concerning breach of trust by a major corporation, because what we're seeing now, the breaches of 85 million users, 57 million users, these are very, very serious breaches that could have major effect. This person could have sold that money to East European blackmail gangs or to Chinese operatives. How do we establish internationally rules that actually force these companies to play by the law? Because many of them seem to think that laws are somehow quaint and only for domestic companies. They say themselves as international and above domestic law.
So we're investigating some of these issues, including the Uber case, which is all fine and good, and we'll try our best to find the truth and make recommendations. I think part of the solution starts with sanctions. There have to be credible sanctions that give a message to people who would otherwise violate the law that they need to get in line. As to international norms, it's a laudable objective. I would start with having cooperation between DPAs, between data protection authorities of various countries, and try to harmonize laws to the extent possible, which brings me to the issue of adequacy and whether Canada's law should be closer to the GDPR. International norms is laudable.
You would support us adopting GDPR?
As an inspiration. I've made certain recommendations. You have in your PIPEDA review report. We don't have to align exactly to the GDPR, but the GDPR is a good model.
Thank you, Mr.